Welcome back to the #1 breakfast show in the country, Morning at NTV. We did have our first conversation largely centering around the skyrocketing teenage pregnancies. Right now, we want to talk about those who are grappling most within the informal sector. Who are they? The women. They are grappling the most. And that's a conversation that we plan to have. During the 2020 lockdown, you did see the vendors disappear from the streets. Didn't you wonder where they were? Didn't you wonder what they were eating? Didn't you wonder how they were making a living without any way of making ends meet? So those are some of the conversations that have taken center stage during this COVID-19 pandemic. Young women, yes, are the biggest chunk of people within the informal sector. But then according to the experts we've been speaking to, they contend that 1.8 million traders within this informal sector might not go back to pre-pandemic economic activity levels by 2023, meaning women right now are working within the negatives until 2023. What should be done to alleviate this challenge? I do have Martha, yes, Tukahirwa. She is the Regional Advocacy and Communications Manager at CIHA. She's not alone. We also have Molly Wambi. Molly Wambi, she is from the Kawempe Street Vendors Cooperative. Right. And they join me right now in the studio to talk about the plight of the women within the informal sector. Very good morning.
Good morning.
All right, Martha, I'll start with you. Who dominates the informal sector? Let's start there.
So statistics show that up to 66% of businesses, informal businesses in Uganda are actually owned and led by women. And then you have up to 80% of those being, very petty trade and almost very marginalized
mangoes,
and exactly,
the people
very
we usually
dynamic
see on the streets.
On the streets, exactly.
All right, go ahead.
And so within this COVID-19 pandemic, we saw their vulnerability increase. And as we were speaking before the show, I was saying that where did these women go?
Indeed.
A lot of them had to retreat back to the rural setting, to their villages. Reason being, there was the assumption that they would be able to do some sort of subsistence farming to be able to look after their dependents. But unfortunately, for so many, they were trapped behind doors with their partners, many of whom were abusive, and so we had an increase in intimate partner violence.
Many of whom are also not working. So
Exactly.
here I am, there's a man in the house who's not working. The former street vendor is also not working.
Is not
so
working.
when the woman says, I need money for food, the man gets angry and slaps start flying around.
Exactly.
So domestic violence takes center stage.
Exactly. But also we look at another side of the issue, which is just a low culture of saving.
A low culture of saving.
Because how do you expect a lot of these women, live hand to mouth.
Indeed.
And so you're taking away that income, and they've been earning literally, nothing, peanuts, and so there was no buffer. And so we saw a lot of these households be pushed to the brink of absolute poverty, where people do not have anything to eat, nothing to eat.
Meaning the 100,000 that was being disbursed to people who are vulnerable during this pandemic, if this money was to be given to women in the informal sector, they would take the whole of it.
They would, but
because
also,
they are the majority right now.
They are the majority. In the first lockdown, unfortunately, we did not have any sort of relief package. Yes, we did have food, and unfortunately, a lot of this food distribution was done without
due
process. But also, we saw a lot of middle-class families also be beneficiary to this food relief.
Yes,
so it was mind-boggling. And then you had those who are living in the informal settings, just outside the gate, for example, not having access to food. So there was no formula, should I say. I applaud the government for this second round of lockdown, because at least we saw that there was the 100,000 that was the 100,000 that was kind of a buffer, but it's not. Was there any explanation of what that 100,000, how they came up with that figure?
That is Martha Tukahirwa. She is actually the Regional Advocacy and Communications Manager with CIHA. Let's also bring in one of the vendors from the Kawempe Street Vendors Cooperative. Well, in the respect of trying to get the real information from the real source, you are one of the people who are actually affected by this COVID-19 pandemic, but how and in what respect? Explain to the viewer how you were affected.
Okay, thank you. During the pandemic, we were at home. The men were at home, the women, the kids. Everything was disturbing because there was no money, no one was working. Children could cry, they wanted food. There was no money to buy food. The moment you tell the husband that the kids need money, need food, the husband could get bitter.
Yeah.
We end up fighting. Domestic violence, it increased. We had nowhere to run to. There was no public transport because if a man beats you, you have to go to report. There was nowhere to go because we had no money to access public transport, and public transport was closed. So people were being beaten. There was no one to help. When we turned to the other side of working, when we tried to access streets to work, we were being beaten.
Yes, I remember that.
Stickers could take us, they grab you, they put you on the truck, they drive you. Some people are in, like for men, they are in Chitalia, the women, they are at Chigo.
Still over vending.
Yes.
Wow, go ahead.
The moment you reach City Hall, they penalty you. You have no money, they just take you to prison.
So
People
how have you been
there.
surviving during this pandemic? Would like to know.
But the thing is, we've been starving because we have nowhere to get something to eat. We could go to neighbors. Do you have something? If the neighbor has, the neighbor gives. I could call people. Do you have something? I am a leader. My women were crying. Molly, what are we going to eat? What are we going to do? Women are there crying in their houses. I could call some people, like there are some women in an NGO, AYASI. I called her, the executive director. Could you help? She told me, you know, they closed our this, what is that?
DGF, Democratic
Yes.
Governance Facility,
So
that was
they-
funding most of the NGOs. So
Yes.
money is not coming in.
Yes.
Yes, go ahead.
I cried, but I had nothing to do. We tried this man of the relief fund
Yes.
from Prime Minister. We registered. No one got.
Go ahead.
So I tried to look for the way how I could reach Madame Nabanja. I failed. So we were there. Some women used to wash clothes to other people. They earn living. And I also tried my level best. I tried to get lemon. I sold lemon at my place, whereby I got something to feed my family, because I have a family of 8 people. The husband was not working. I was the one to feed them. And then, but due to some trainings I've had through SIHA Network, an NGO, I managed to pass through the pandemic.
Amazing. That is Molly Wambi. She is a vendor, and she's part of the Kawempe Street Vendors Cooperative. Very, very somber conversation we are having. Martha Tukahirwa is a member of SIHA, that is, she's the Regional Advocacy and Communications Manager. Of course, she's going to be telling us more about the good work they've been doing to help the challenged street vendors. Help us take into account some of those activities you've expedited to help the street vendors during this pandemic, government aside.
Great. So SIHA, first of all, identifies as an advocacy institution, but we also look at how do we unlock the potential of women and also the women's movement. And so a lot of our activities are around building capacity, strengthening the capacity of these women, and also building on their agency, because we are of the view that we do not hand agency or empowerment to women, but they actually claim it and they have it. And so what we've done is build their capacity in advocacy, being able to, you know, lobby government, but also being able to advocate for their rights. And tangibly, they've come out with some fantastic outputs. So for example, they have the Women's Manifesto, which is a 5-year document that they, you know, came up with, a practical tool where they hold the state and maybe also non-state actors accountable. They were taken through financial management, you know, just very fast bookkeeping. And so you'll find a lady like Molly is running her business in a more, she's assertive and she's very confident. And so this is some of the work that we're doing, but most importantly of all is that you notice that she says she's from the Kawempe Women Traders Society. We are passionate, and we believe that if women can be organized, there is power in numbers, especially when it comes to advocacy.
We are getting reports, Martha Tukahira, that some 1.8 million traders or women within the informal sector might not go back to pre-pandemic economic levels by 2023. Isn't this very scary to you? The fact that they are operating in negatives?
Absolutely, it's very scary. I think world over, where we were seeing that the long-term impact of COVID is one that we've not taken into account. And so right now, I think the onus is on government and civil society to work together to buffer, you know, this impact. And this could come in different ways. You know, we've been advocating for, you know, credit facilities for these women in the informal economy. How can they access credit? You know, but also in terms of awareness campaigns on what their lived reality is. Molly being here and sharing her story is actually, it's an advocacy tool. It's saying that this is our reality, what can be done. But also, Uganda is signatory to so many regional and international human rights mechanisms. The onus is on us to align our policies with these human rights mechanisms that we have signed up to.
Do you think the shrinking civic space that we are currently grappling with will make it impossible for such organizations like yours and other NGOs that are geared towards, you know, alleviating the vulnerabilities and shocks that are befalling our people during this pandemic impossible? The fact that government is, you know, putting too much strains on the civil society and NGOs, do you think it will dampen your resolve to undertake many of these activities that you are currently expediting during this COVID-19 pandemic?
It makes it a challenge. But let me say that for true civil society activists and movements, you know, this is the work that we do. You know, a lot of us are working in the trenches, but it just calls for us to redesign, but also reprogram ourselves, because yes, you know, we might be seeing shrinking, rather civic space shrinking, but government cannot operate in a vacuum, you know, because again, we are the ones that have direct access to these grassroots communities.
Besides creating an enabling environment through which civil society organizations and NGOs could work collaboratively with the government to help alleviate the vulnerabilities and shocks that are befalling up women within the informal sector, that's what I wanted you to actually explain to the viewer about. Yes.
So one, I think something that we've been doing is convening learning spaces, you know, where, you know, government comes together with civil society to co-develop or to co-create initiatives that will be able to, you know, to buffer this impact. And also, I think civil society should not be seen so much as a watchdog, but we are co-partners in development, and especially in socio-economic development, because yet again, we are a less economically developed country, and therefore there are lots of dynamics that come into play.
Mr. President Yoweri Kaguta Museveni, you are watching Morning at NTV right now. We need to remove the shackles that have been put on the Democratic Governance Facility, because they were doing the most when it comes to funding of the local NGOs. They are helping our people alleviate the vulnerabilities and shocks that are befalling our people during this COVID-19 pandemic. If you put shackles on DGF, money will not go to smaller organizations that have been helping people on the ground. Let's resolve this issue, because we do have the victim, one of the victims in our midst here. So this is not only Romy Busiku in collusion with the DGF to maybe make government look bad, that our people are vulnerable and they want to paint this country in a bad light. No, 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 no. It's because of a compounded threat that is being jeered by the COVID-19 pandemic. And that's why we have one of the victims, Molly Wambi. What do you want the government to do for you?
First and foremost, I'll request the government to let the
Democratic Governance
yes,
Facility.
they work because they support the NGOs and the NGOs reach the grassroots. So it's my request to the government. Secondly, let them consider us. Let them consider us street vendors, because we are also citizens of Uganda. And I want them to design a license to street vendors, because they usually say that we'll work illegally. So it would have been better for them to design a license to us so that we work normally as other people, because we also pay taxes.
Would you also advocate for free space, maybe a market created by the government to help you expedite your activities?
It's okay.
Because many of the vendors I did talk to were saying we make money moving from one place to another. If you create a market, we will not be making any money because the customers will not be coming to us. We need to go to them.
Yes.
Go ahead.
It needs them to design a good place, because, for instance, Wandega Market, people cannot access it. Someone is in a car and wants to buy something. He cannot park at the roadside and go to the market. So they need to design a clear space for people to vend. Yes.
And also, KC has been arresting these food vendors. Would you call on to the government to stop this practice?
Yes. They handle people badly, because sometimes they drop women, the clothes go up.
Indeed. Very inhumane.
It's a shame, because the moment they drop them, there is media.
Indeed.
They capture everything, they air it out.
Indeed.
You get shame.
All right, thank you very much, Molly Wambi. Recommendations to government before I let you go in a minute.
In line with that, there is the street ordinance that was put into place in 2019, and it's still in discussion. I think we need to expedite the process, you know, to have policies that are actually favorable to the conditions of women, but also favorable to their lived realities. But we must also take on a multi-sector approach. We cannot operate, you know, alone. I think it's important that all state and non-state stakeholders come together and you know, forge a way forward in terms of bringing to light, but also improving the conditions of women in the informal economy.
Very insightful conversation with Martha Tukahira, the Regional Advocacy and Communications Officer with CIHA. They are doing the most to help our women within the informal sector, and they are calling on to government to do the same. And also, we did have Molly Wambi. Molly Wambi, she is part of the Kawempe Street Women Vendors Cooperative. Well, that conversation has been put to rest. My name is Romy Busiku. We still do have a lot more within the pipeline. Moving on also would be a detrimental mistake. We'll be right back.